This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results. Are you ready to feel the power?
Hey everybody, welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. And today I'm flying solo. The beard is actually across the hall in our sales meeting that I played hooky from to bring you this guy, Mr. John Bachmann, Vice President of Client Services at Norwood Insurance Agency up in Massachusetts. But we're not going to talk about that. Maybe just a little bit. What we're really going to talk about, though, is his new book, The Successful Adjusters Playbook. And if you listen to this podcast, you'll understand why that's important. But I'm going to tell you anyhow, in case it's your first time. It's because you need to know how freaking claims work if you're going to sell this stuff to people. So know how adjusters think. That's how you differentiate yourself when you're getting in front of people at the point of sales. So with that being said, a man who needs no further introduction, Mr. John Bachmann, welcome to the show, my friend.
Much for having me, David. Really appreciate you having me on here. Big fan of yours.
Thank you. And as somebody who's getting ready to go through and write my second book here in the very near future, or finish writing my second book in the very near future. It's already written, John. It's just in my head. That's the problem. I got to get it on paper.
Well, that's what happened with this book as well. It's been in my head for years, 5, 6, 7 years here. And finally, I got the push from a buddy of mine, Chris Stanley. He pushed me over the edge, and that's why I finally got on the paper.
Well, it's funny because we had Stephen Sedlak on who talked about his book, The Work Comp Effect. And when we were interviewing him, Kyle said, I don't even know where I'd begin to start. Truthfully, I've probably got like 10 books written in my head right now. It's just a matter of when I need to purge room for other things and I need to get that out and not carry it around with me anymore. That's what I do. So talk a little bit about you before we get into the book and everything. Talk a little bit about your background and how you got to your role where you're at right now. And then I want to dive in and talk about it because I really think, your book is one that's good for a whole lot of reasons, and most people probably wouldn't think that it would be something that I would make recommended reading for a producer. But I want to talk about all those reasons why. So talk about your background, get everybody up to speed who doesn't know who you are, and then we'll jump into some of the Q&A stuff about the book.
Yeah, perfect. So a little bit about me. Let's go back to how I fell into insurance. I was one of those guys, like many of us, that fell into insurance.
All of us fell into it, man.
So I was actually working for a college women's basketball team for 4 years. And that was my plan. I was going to have my radio show, and I was going to be an assistant coach at the D1 level. And then the head coach I worked for, her contract was non-renewed. She was fired. So all of us had to look for jobs, and I realized, you know what, maybe it's not so stable in college athletics and needed something. So as luck would have it, ended up signing up with a temp agency, found my way on the carrier side in a claims unit. Next thing you know, 17 years later, I adjusted every type of claim. I've led award-winning teams of claims adjusters for 2 different carriers. And also during those 17 years, did a lot of work on the customer experience front of things and cross-functional teams there. And from there, that opened some doors with a tech company where I was helping insurance carriers, agencies, and agency networks redefine their customer experience selling a platform. But wrapping up things there, COVID hit. I realized that I'm not getting that time back with my kids. They're young kids, and I wanted to stop traveling all over the country, wanted to be local. And all my agency friends were saying, you know what, you should be jumping on the agency side. And then doors opened up, and Brian, the owner of the agency here at Norwood Insurance in Groveland, Mass. We've been chatting for a couple of years of what it might look like to have John Bachmann here, and timing was right, so we teamed up and said let's rock and roll here. So that's kind of where it came from, and how I ended up on the agency side here.
That's cool. So you have adjusted every kind of claim at this point, which makes you invaluable to that agency that you're in, because you understand what people are going to go through before they understand what they're going to go through.
Well, exactly. And I'm very surprised. This is something I've been talking about since joining. I'm surprised there aren't more claims folks that jump over to the sales side of things, because it's a huge differentiator. I remember those times when I was the shoulder to cry on, whether that be that I was able to help them because they were properly covered, or those times when, you know what, they weren't properly covered. And talking about, hey, sorry, we can't do X, Y, and Z because that's not what your policy's there for. So I've had those tough conversations, and being able to talk on the sales side now of this is why you need this is why you need that. It's a huge differentiator, like I said, and I'm surprised more and more claims folks don't come over on to the sales side.
You know what? I think it's interesting, man, because to me, I mean, and this might sound really uneducated or really brilliant. Like I'm polar, man. I'm either going to sound really good or really stupid when I say things, but luckily most of the time I fall on the correct side of that. But, you know, the whole reason any of us are in this business is because we're making money by selling a promise, right? We're selling a promise that a policy is going to pay in the event that there's a claim. And I'm always blown away by the limited amount of interaction. And I'm not saying every agency out there, but the limited amount of interaction that agencies have in the claims process, right? And I'm not an advocate for saying that you need to be in the way and muddying the waters for the adjuster. That's not what I'm talking about. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, as a producer specifically, you know, I tell people all the time, there's a role that changes when the policy is sold, right? When you're hired, your role as a producer changes. It doesn't mean that you just go away and let your service people handle everything for you. You become a quarterback, and you have to manage a variety of people and a variety of personalities now that are interfacing with your new client. And claims from the carrier is certainly one of those people that you need to be interfacing with. You know, we don't sell heavy on threats, and I shouldn't say threats, but scare tactics about this isn't going to be covered or whatever else. It's total cost of risk and risk management. And, you know, when you're dealing with workers' compensation claims specifically, there's so many ways that those things can go, right? There's when you're dealing with business income, depending on what type of an entity it is that you're dealing with. I mean, truthfully, the absolute worst claims that I've dealt with have not been workers' comp claims. I mean, I've had a couple of bad ones, but I've not had a fatality yet on the workers' comp side. I have had fatalities on the auto side, and I've had some really nasty multi-million-dollar business income claims. And I'm never going to know every ounce of intricacy of every one of those claims. And guess what? Neither are adjusters, right? The ones who, when you're dealing in the middle market, the ones who you're dealing with when you have a claim that gets to be a certain size, like this is what they do with laser focus. You know, it's like I tell people all the time, I'm not going to go to a general practitioner to get open heart surgery. I want to go to the best cardiac person that there is. So, you know, you would think that people in my role as a producer and agency principal would be very, very diligent in the nurturing of the relationships with the claims handlers and departments for each of our accounts, so that we knew the best way that we could interface and fit our role. And, you know, let's face it, John, not every one of our clients thinks that insurance companies are the greatest thing ever. So we have to be a little bit of a politician too, to make sure they understand that, look, it's not that these people are fearmongers and tightwads that aren't going to pay their claim. Their goal is to get your person back to work as quickly as possible, or to end this claim as quickly as possible too, because it limits their financial liabilities. So
in one way I see, not to cut you off there, David, but
no, you needed to, man. I was going to go for a while, so your timing was perfect.
You were spitting gold, though. But really, the way I see the agent coming into play on the claim side is to be the advocate and be the conduit and the communication channel.
But for both parties. And I think this is really, really important for agencies to understand, because your client is not always right. Sometimes you're the one that has to be that person that goes back and you become the one that has to deliver that tough message to your client. Maybe they don't agree with where the reserves are. Maybe they don't agree with the treatment plan. If you're not involved in that, they're just going to continue to fester and get angrier and angrier, and you're going to end up losing the account because you didn't interject yourself to become what I call the translator, right? A lot of times that's all I have to do is translate what the adjuster's saying to what the client is hearing to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Once you can do that, then you're golden. Adjusters don't always do the best job of communicating in the language that the client understands, and I'm not faulting them for that.
So true.
That's why we have to be involved in it, right? And clients don't always understand that a lot of the stuff, specifically with workers' comp, that's legislated. Like, we don't have a whole lot of latitude that we can deal with here. We have to operate in a certain framework. So I think at a bare minimum, translator, quarterback, whatever, those are the ways I look at it.
Well, one thing I always struggled with too, and this is when I was consulting with agencies, is, agents, they tend to have a great relationship with the marketing rep. They have a great relationship with the underwriters. They don't have a clue who's handling the claims or even who's leading those claims teams. As agents, we have to do a better job of getting involved with the claims people to know, and again, to be able to sell that promise that when shit hits the fan, that Sally over here is the one handling the claim. Or it's Bobby at this company. I know they handle it great, and if something were to go wrong, I know you're going to be taken care of. If you're just dealing with the marketing reps and the underwriters, can you really have that honest conversation as well? I know why we do it, and I know why we have those relationships there, but we should be expanding the relationships with the claims folks too.
Well, here's what I know. I know that the average client out there assumes that the claims department's part of your agency, period. Like, the average client does not distinguish the difference between you as the agent or broker and the actual carrier when claims time comes. They think everybody's in bed together. And part of what the messaging needs to be is exactly what I said, that you're the advocate. Hey, I want you to understand that, you're going to be dealing with this adjuster. Here's your claim number. Here's the adjuster's name. Here's their email. Here's their phone number, and all of that. You will hear from this person in the next 24 to 48 hours. I'm going to follow back up with you after 48 hours to make sure that conversation has happened. And we'll do everything we can at the agency level to make sure that we're facilitating this claim the best we can. The reason why I want to do that is I don't, let's just call it what it is. Not every adjuster's great. Not every agent's great, right? And especially in a time when the labor pool is depleted, many carriers, especially national carriers, are having to use outsourced adjusters and not have employees in the loads are getting higher. Look, I'm not gonna, we all know we live in the environment, right? Your client doesn't know that. Right. And so unless you set the table the right way as the agent and let them know, hey, keep me in the loop. I'm not the one who has the ability to handle this. I remind people of that when I, regardless of the type of claim, hey, do we have coverage for this? Here's the deal. This is how we wrote the policy. I don't see anything from looking at it from my standpoint that would preclude it, but it's really not my role to either award or deny coverage in a claims scenario. It's my job to take the information and report that over to the carrier so that they can determine the best way to get this thing resolved. Period. I'm not going to say yes or no or any of that. I'm going to be very political and middle of the road in my statement so that they can't come back and hold it against me. But I do think that a lot of people, especially when you're dealing with like smaller commercial and maybe even personal lines, sometimes agencies don't even know when these things happen because people are just going direct to the carrier and it's already down the road before we ever get the notification that a claim's been filed or whatever else. That's why when we onboard a new client, part of that process is educating them on claims come to daddy. You got to report claims into the agency so that then we can get that information and we can manage the process for you. And we don't want, we don't want to make it complicated, but we gotta set that division of, hey, we're the agency here, you're here, carrier's over here, we're the middleman. Don't come shoot me if this person's not being responsive. Call me and I'll get involved as much as I need to. But our goal, truthfully, is to have automatic tasks set for follow-up and everything on our end anyhow, so that we're constantly in front of the client before it gets to the point they have to call us.
Yeah, and it goes a little bit further than the educating piece. I think it's the training. Training them. This is what we need you to do in case that happens, and the reason why, and then pushing it through. And I'll tell you, when I came from the carrier side, to be honest, I was like, why the hell are agents filing these claims? But then, sitting on this side, I know exactly why. And it makes so much more sense. We had one the other day where if they did not come through us, the carrier never would have called the individual. It was an auto loss, nothing crazy, but it was like 3, 4, 5 days before that adjuster was going to be calling out, and we're better than that. Come on. That's why people have such a bad perception of the insurance industry, is because of crap like that.
Well, we give them a laundry list of reasons why they can have a bad perception of the insurance industry. Hey, go to one insurance conference and hang out in the hotel lobby bar. You'll need no more material after that.
Yeah, well, it's probably lightened up a little bit now with all, well, at least up here up north. I don't know how it is down there with all your meetings and everything, but.
Well, it's funny, man, because people say that all the time, specifically about Florida, but we're not open any more than anywhere else. I mean, and I'm not, I stay non-political 100% on the podcast, but at the end of the day, man, I mean, some of the crap you see in the media is fake, period. And I can tell you, I live in Florida. I know what the environment is. I know where we do and don't have to wear masks. I know what happens when my kids go to school if they come into contact with somebody. And it's no different than what you're seeing anywhere else. The media just doesn't like DeSantis, so they're going to make Florida look to be as bad as it possibly can. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's the truth. That is 100% the truth.
And I have to say, who better of a scapegoat than you, David? Who better?
Yeah, I'll take it. Whatever. But so I think that it's interesting though, and I think that sometimes too, and I'd be interested in your perspective on this. I've never had this situation. I feel like I'm pretty good in, negotiating middle ground with people and making sure that the relationships and everything are on point. So I don't have adversarial relationships at all, but I think that a lot of times that our industry has created an environment where that's what's determined, is that there is an adversarial relationship between whoever the claimant is and the claims department and the agency for that matter. And even to the point where sometimes when I ask questions, I'm asking questions to be educated, right? So I'll ask an adjuster a question and they get defensive, and it's because they're so used to people picking them apart for their job. I have to preface that by saying, look, I know that I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I'm just letting you know. I know you know how to do your job. This is for my own education, period. And if you answer a question for me once, I can promise you I'll never ask you the same question again. But I've never been through this situation before. And I think it's a great way for people to be educated, because this is what I know. When I'm sitting at the point of sale, if I have 5 examples of people in that industry that have had claims and different things that would be low-hanging fruit, and I can talk about how I was involved in those and what I know about each of those circumstances, chances are somebody else going in to sell them insurance is not going to have those conversations.
No, it is. And it goes back to that differentiator of being able to have those stories of the past, and you asking the question of whether it be the adjuster or the in-house claims examiner, whoever that may be, and educating yourself so you can then have that story. That's going to separate you, and it is going to make it a quote-unquote easier sale for you when discussing what else you're going to be adding on.
So let's talk about this, man. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. When you were an adjuster back in the company days, what were the things that frustrated you about dealing with the retail agents and agencies? What are the things you felt like we could have done better? Because I think that, part of it too is we don't have that conversation, right? The carriers don't say, hey, look, these are things you could be doing to make our life so much easier to set the table the right way for this stuff. Talk a little bit about that, because there has to be some frustration there.
I'll tell you, the biggest thing, and you've already alluded to it, is that the customer aspect of things. The customer calls you up and says X, Y, and Z. This is what happened. That pisses you off, and then it brings you to call me up as an adjuster, say. And
not taking the deep breath and saying, okay, this is one side of the story. Let me call and find out what the adjuster's telling me, because guys like me, unless we're trained, will go in guns blazing. It's automatically the adjuster's fault, right? And
Right.
meanwhile, I understand, having seen adjuster's notes on numerous claims, how many missed phone calls happened and
Yes.
voicemails were left and emails that didn't get responded to. And now all of a sudden the adjuster wasn't the one that was being non-responsive. It was your client, but you sided with your client before you ever picked up the phone and called. How do you get out of it?
Yeah, and that is the biggest one. It's I haven't heard from them. They're never calling me back. They're never calling me back, whatever it may be. And I've seen it myself where I've called 1,000 times, sent a million emails, text messaged over, and I'm getting radio silence on the other side. And all of a sudden, an agent's calling me saying, "Hey, why the hell are you leaving this customer out in the wind?" It's like I've been busting my butt trying to, and that's the battle right there. That if we just step back and say, "Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, right, let me see what I can do for you." Give a call. Hey, this is what the customer just said. They're saying they haven't heard from you. Could you just bring me up to speed rather than going full throttle at them?
Guys, what John's saying is there's a soft way to approach this. Like, listen, my clients come to me and said that you're not being responsive. I know you well enough to know that's not the case. Tell me what's going on from your end of things. Now you have not gone in and confronted somebody. You're giving them a chance to prove the fact that they've actually done what they're supposed to do. And, look, John, you and I both know the same thing. You guys have a limited amount of time in the day, and you have a big stack of claims on your desk. You can't just leave one at the top of the stack and wait until you execute every piece and part of that for the day before you move on to the next one. You're making a call, you're sending an email, and then you're moving on to the next one until you get that one answered, and then it resurfaces. And it's a never-ending cycle. The claims don't stop.
Oh, no, they certainly don't. And like you said before, the caseloads right now are pretty high. They're pretty crazy, whether it be in-house folks or even independent adjusters. They have a lot on their plate right now. That's never to be an excuse of why they can't help out the customer. But it goes back to that relationship piece, that if you know that adjuster, and you know what their normal course of business is, or what their cycle times are, you can relay that and you can anticipate what's going to happen. And if things out of the ordinary, all right, that's when you start to raise flags and say, hey, what the hell's going on here? But if we don't have those relationships, we won't know any of that, right?
Yep, agreed. And if you don't have the relationships, you don't always get all the information that you want, right? I mean, from the agency side, all of my adjusters would come to you right now and say unequivocally that, yeah, I expect perfection in literally everything, but I hold myself to the same standard, and I'm not unreasonable in that. And they understand that when I call and say, hey, look, just out of curiosity, can you let me see the adjuster's notes on this account versus just give me what's in the loss runs? They understand why I want to see that. And it's not because I want to browbeat them about how they're handling the claim. I want to find out, show me everything from beginning to end. Is there an issue with our accident and incident reporting from the client? Is there an issue with that not being complete when it's sent out? Do we have a lag time problem that's causing this to go on? Let's look at how the client handled bringing this person back. Do we have an opportunity to improve our recover at work or light duty program so that we're not having such a huge amount of indemnity on claims? Or, getting into the business income piece, looking at all the financial records that you have to have access to. The worst claim I've ever dealt with ended up settling for, it was around $2 million. It was either a hair under or a hair above. I want to say this one was 2.3 and the other one was 1.8, but it was literally it was an egg laying facility that had an issue with snow and ice on the roof that got hot enough that it melted, then it refroze the next night and snowed again, and it dumped on it, and the roof collapsed and pushed the four walls of the building out so that the roof was sitting on the four walls. But we lost a ton of chickens. There was no way to save them in the building based on what happened. Well, the issue that we had was that avian bird flu had finally made it into the United States in the Midwest, and this account was in the Carolinas. They didn't have issues with avian bird flu, but because of the avian bird flu, the supply chain of the market was completely out of whack, and so we had to wait. We waited almost 2 years to adjust this claim because the client was in a financial position to absorb it, but they wanted to see what happened with the actual market price of the eggs during that time because they skyrocketed. And if we would have settled for what we would have normally projected based on the prior year, there's no way. They would have been so far upside down on the value of what they really had. And so we waited the time for it to be adjusted. If I would have never been through that exercise before and I went into a client who had a recent business income loss, oh, it'll be a couple months and this whole thing will be cleared up. I mean, that's not how it works. And producers don't know that, man. I mean, and I think that's part of the problem. We're just sending these people out there blind to sell insurance, and they don't know how insurance works when insurance has to work. It's not sell a policy and walk away. You need to be able to be that person that's there when your client has the issue and tell them what to expect.
Right, because again, that's what you're selling. The promise that when it hits the fan, that the claims people are going to be there. And if you can't have those conversations, what are you really selling? What's that promise that you are truly selling?
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about the book, man. I mean, you were carrying it around in your head for a while. You purged, you got it out. It's the Successful Adjuster's Playbook, but I have to believe there's relevance, to anybody in the insurance industry that needs to understand claims. And by the way, for the people who listen to this, you're out working or attempting to work on middle market companies. This is a non-negotiable. This goes to the top of your reading list like almost immediately. If you've not dealt with claims, if you've not dealt with claims before, or you don't understand how adjusters think, trust me, spend the money, buy the book, read it, and then you'll realize, oh crud, there's a whole lot to my game that's been missing, and then you'll thank me for it.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate that. But what's funny is people that have read through the book now, too, they're saying, you know what, you shouldn't have called it Successful Adjuster's Playbook. It should just be the Successful Playbook. Because all the concepts in this book can be used in any profession, any relationship. Because really what I focused on was the interpersonal skills. A lot of time we hear referred to as soft skills. I hate that term because they're some of the hardest skills. But that's really where I focus on. For any adjuster, there are lots of resources for the technical, to climb up on a roof, to look at bent metal, whatever it may be. There's plenty of resources.
Sure.
There's hardly anybody talking about how do we treat the other humans and how do we interact with the other humans. That's the most important thing when handling a claim. They're going through a stressful, emotional time. And if you're not able to treat somebody like a person, a family member, a friend, it's just going to be a transaction. And we might as well just let artificial intelligence and machine learning handle all the claims. But that's not reality here. And that's what the book's all about, is those interpersonal skills and how you can better interact with your customers.
Yeah, and I mean, from going to a book that I also subscribe to heavily, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, which is a fantastic read, and I talk about it every other podcast. But what John's talking about is what Voss refers to as tactical empathy. You need to be empathetic with people. This is a guy that's negotiating for people's lives, and if you don't have the right cadence, if you don't have the right tone in your voice when you're delivering that message, it can be completely misinterpreted. And I look at it this way. Think about the number of times that you send somebody a text message where if you read it literally, it means something completely different than what you wanted it to mean. And now your, conversation has gone completely off the rails with this person because they just mistook what your intent was behind something. And that's why I always tell people, try your best to communicate with people one-on-one as much as you can verbally, because there's so much that's lost in the intent, in the emotion, in the written word, where it would happen on a daily basis to me. And I think that that's huge, man. I mean, the people that are out there producing, truthfully, it would be really cool if there was like a way for the carriers to have like a co-op or an intern where agencies would supply free labor for claim centers and let producers go and sit in there in a round robin fashion. And then they would get the ability to train on claims and what it looks like. And they don't have to do it for a long time, but maybe, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, just sit at a claims desk for a while, handle this stuff, and then go back into your agency. I think that solves a lot of the world's problems.
I'll tell you, it changes your mindset. So at the first carrier I worked there for 14 years. Every year we used to have call center week. And what call center week was, all the executives, all the upper management, we would go around and we'd sit in the call center, whether it's the claims call center or the contact center, where you would sit and you'd shadow those calls, and you'd sit and you'd take those calls as well. And for a CEO of an insurance company to sit in and listen to a first notice of loss call, that changes your perspective of when you're in the boardroom of the decisions you're making and the levers you're pulling. You know what, maybe what we were planning on doing, that's changed a little bit. So I think you're onto something there. That might be another program or maybe another TV show that you can pull together here, David.
There we go. Yeah, we're actually getting ready to do the casting for Protege season 2 this week. We're sending out the casting call, which is cool, man. I really wasn't going to do it again. And then, like, after it died down, I started getting a bunch of emails from people saying, really hope you're doing season 2. I want to throw my name in the hat. I want to be part of it. And so that was enough to push me. It was grueling, though. Truthfully, it was grueling to do because with COVID and everything and all of the changes and stuff, you know, we had to push innovation back from the spring to November now. And originally we were going to be done and the winner was going to be announced last April. The whole thing ended up taking almost an entire year to put together.
Well, you know what, God bless you guys anyways. Even in a perfect year, it's a huge undertaking of what you all did. And then you add in a pandemic and it changes the game a bit.
It was a cool experience though. And I think that if we it's like anything else in life, man, if you believe in the message and you believe in the purpose behind what you're doing, and in our case, that's literally us trying to change the way an industry is perceived and get some excitement wrapped around it. You know, you got to grind, man. It might be 2, 3, 4 seasons before it takes off. But, you know, things were validated for me when I saw that we got just between 5,500 and 6,000 votes total for the winner. And so if I can see that many people that are paying attention, even if they have nothing to do with the insurance industry and they were just generated by guys like Derek Hayden, who won, but from Small Town USA, he was on the front page of his paper. He was on the news. He was on radio shows. Like, it just made a lot of buzz for that guy. And, you know, we didn't take sponsors. We don't have any kind of ad revenue coming from it. Nothing. I bankrolled 100% of that myself. Now, truth be told, it's an excellent lead magnet for killing commercial, and it was obviously a business decision that was calculated to do that. But it was really interesting to see how the whole thing went down. And really, 2 thoughts. Number one, you know, Bradley Flowers said it to me originally that, you know, $1 million listings is what made the real estate industry sexy. So if you can create a way to get people to see what it's like to go out and make $25,000 to $50,000 in commissions on a single account and then replicate that, that's a lot more realistic to people than going out and getting, you know, selling multi-million-dollar homes. There's only so many of those that you can sell. The other piece of it is Hayden went out and, you know, the way that we did it was we created the challenges, we ran them through the challenges, but there was a production component to it where the challenges were them building their mousetrap. Then they had to go out and use the mousetrap they built to try and generate real revenue. That joker's Small Town USA. Like, literally, he corrected me. I said, I don't even know if there's more than 2 traffic lights in Shelbyville, Illinois. He let me know that there are 5. But I mean, this guy's from Small Town USA, and in 3 months generated $70,000 of agency commission, not premium, just using those mousetraps. Like, so that's proof of concept, right? That if you have the right proven and replicable process, and then you have the grit and determination to go out and implement that and execute it daily, you're going to win. And so that's all we were trying to do with it. I'm pretty pumped with what season 2 is going to look like, though, because based on the people who have been reaching out to me, there's some savages that are gonna come on board. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I can tell you, I'm not ready for season 2 yet. Maybe 3.
There you go. There you go. So so talk a little bit, like, when you put the book together, what's your favorite part of the book? I mean, I know that's kind of crazy because I can't really tell you if I can tell you what I lean to when in the book, the one book that I've written. I know the one that I think is probably the most impactful, and that's the chapter where I teach people how to teach their client how to fire their existing representation in an easy and professional manner, so that they don't have to worry about, dealing with a bunch of back and forth and losing an account when they had a chance to write it. So that's probably my favorite part, because I know that's the one that's the most important and is often botched and overlooked. But what's your favorite part of the book you wrote?
That's a tricky one, and you got me thinking about Jerry Seinfeld a bit here. When people asked him about what his favorite episode of Seinfeld was, he goes, all of them, because it's like taking a breath. Whichever one gets me to the next one is my favorite. So, but probably the biggest piece is, I refer to it in the book as the big three. And for any of you people thinking about those sports analogies with the current teams, forget about it. There's only one big three. It was the Boston Celtics in the mid-'80s. Bird, Parrish, McHale. All others are inferior. So
they tried to recreate it with Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett, right? Yeah. It's not the same.
Not the same. There's only one. There will only ever be one big three. But that
was a different brand of basketball back then too, man. We were spoiled. When we grew up, the NBA was different than it is today. I think it's starting to come back around to where it was back then, but there was a period of time for like 15, 20 years where I refused to even watch the NBA because it's just not the same. We had Jordan, Bird, Magic, all of them.
Absolutely. And they were all team players too, where now it's all me players, but I could talk for a few hours about that, but I was much the same as you. I stopped watching altogether, which people thought it's crazy. I work for a college basketball team and I'm not watching basketball at all, but it's true. I just got soured on all of it. But all that to say is I developed a big three on the insurance side, and that was listening, caring, and empathizing, and tying in those concepts with experiences I had, as well as experiences so I interviewed a ton of the greatest minds in claims across the country, and I'd sit down, I'd interview them, and they'd tell me their stories, and those were the reoccurring themes of the best claims, the most impactful claims they've handled in their life. That was the big three that always came up, is because they listened better, or they actually cared and they gave a shit, or they truly empathized. And those are the ones that went extremely smooth, and that the customers raved about them, and that it was a completely different experience than all the other claims. And I'll tell you, in writing the book, not within the book, but in writing the book, those interviews, my favorite part was I'd ask the individuals about their quote unquote legacy claim. What's the one claim that you remember and was impactful? Every single one of them, they had dates, locations. It could have been one of the guys, it was 37 years ago, this claim happened, and he knew the address and he remembered why it was so impactful. Some people were tearing up. Some people were getting chills talking about him, but they all had one of these bigger claims, and that it meant so much that they were sharing those stories with me, and I shared a few of those in the book as well.
So here's the thing, though. I mean, if you're listening, caring, and empathizing, aren't you producing too? That is, like you said, it's not lost on me that this could have just been the Successful Playbook, right? And not just the Successful Adjusters Playbook, because those same three skills are what the absolute best people do from a production and sales standpoint. That's one of the reasons why I'm a huge proponent of planning out all of your questions before you go into the meeting and having as many open-ended questions as possible, because that forces you to listen. And then by finding follow-up questions based on what you hear in those responses, you're demonstrating that you care, and you're doing that in an empathetic manner by then going back and tying examples from your own, life or career into how you respond to those. But listening, caring, and empathy should be three core, characteristics of anybody interacting with anybody else. Like, unless you're living in a cave, you need to do that, period.
Right. It's never mind adjusting, never mind insurance, never mind business. It's your life relationships. If that's your foundation, you'll have good relationships. If you truly go into it listening, caring, and empathizing, you will have good relationships, whether that's selling or handling claims or just being a good spouse.
Yeah, so for everybody listening, in case you haven't figured it out, I basically just did that to John, right? I asked him a question. I listened to what he had to say, and I tied it back to something relevant. It's not that difficult. Practice it, people. You'll win.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? You touched on another thing too. You said taking those three things and you're selling. That's another concept in the book I talk about as well. Is that, hey, claims folks, you're not just handling claims. You are changing the perception of their perception of the insurance industry, and that you can be a retention specialist. You can keep that business around longer. And we know that's going to make companies a lot more money, because retained business is more profitable than new business. And then two, you're a marketing specialist. If you're working with a claimant, a third-party claimant, and you treat them better than their own claims folks take care of them, all of a sudden people are going to say, maybe my company shouldn't be my company. Maybe I should get a quote with this guy. So there's so much more that an adjuster can do within their current role if they just expand their mindset.
So in your career, you have already said that you've adjusted literally every kind of claim. What is what is your favorite types of claims to work with? Understanding that this isn't necessarily asking, what makes you happy about claims or whatever else. Because I'm just saying, like, I want to be professionally challenged and I like to solve problems. What are the claims that really push you to be the best, that you look back and say, that made me better for having gone through that?
You know what? It's probably when I was on the auto bodily injury side and dealing with people going through not the run-of-the-mill injuries, but the significant ones. I mentioned the legacy claims earlier. My legacy claim is I was speaking to a woman who was in a rollover accident with her husband, single car accident. He died in that car. And
she was stuck in there with him.
She was stuck in there, fractured her neck as well. She ended up being in a halo. But I remember having those conversations with her for months and months and months, when, I was supposed to be collecting things about her medical bills and her treatment and how it was going. But we ended up just chatting as like friends. And I was an ear for her to listen to. And that's when I realized that, you know what? My role as this adjuster is so much more than the dollars and cents. I'm getting this woman's life back in order. And that was so impactful to me to know that at that time I was still a punk kid, man. I was in my early 20s, and it really hit me. And then more of those, I was getting more fatality claims, very severe injuries, to know that I could help people get back on their feet again, literally and figuratively. That meant a lot to me. So those types of claims, even though I had a lot of fun being deployed on catastrophes and climbing up on roofs and grinding 12 claims a day, that was a lot of fun, but it didn't have the impact I had on the injury side of things.
Yeah, and imagine when you have those happen earlier in your career that it shapes how you deal with things going forward. So you might not be where you're at today if you wouldn't have dealt with that at that specific time, right? And I think, again, it goes back to so many times, we're bringing in new blood as producers or whatever else, and they may go years before they ever even exposed to having to deal with their first, nasty claim that could turn south on them. And, again, it goes back to what I said before. We need to get involved in this portion of our business much quicker. For us, one of the reasons why I stay involved, and we're actually going through the process right now of overhauling our entire claims delivery process for the agency, and from the uptake of information to reporting to the conversations that are being had, and how our CRM is going to flag all of these things to happen to make sure that nothing at all slips through the cracks. So this is something that's at the forefront of my mind at this point. But it's not something that you should wait forever to expose yourself to. I think that the producers need to jump in. And one of the reasons, especially at the point of sale, is because if we're dealing with accounts that have issues, doesn't matter if it's GL or property or whatever else, especially if it's multiple locations, I want to be able to communicate with my carriers how I would like to receive claims information. When we report it, what does that look like? Are you going to be able to give us location specific reporting? Because if I've got a 10 location restaurant chain that's got a problem with their workers' comp experience mod, part of what we're going to do when we go in is build a leadership and accountability program for all of the location managers, and then we're going to hold them accountable to their own results and make it a material portion of their conversation at their annual review. We want to be able to go back and say, great job for reducing your claims by X% or whatever else. And we also, when we go in and do our experience mod audits and everything else, be able to tie individual mod points and financial costs associated with claims inside of a guaranteed cost workers' comp program, because people don't do that, right? Especially in the middle market, the average middle market account, you're going to get that at the national account level every single time. That's because that's what they're used to. But when you get into the middle market, so many people are selling insurance and not focusing on the overall risk management piece. That's low-hanging fruit for me. If I can go in and talk about how to tie individual unit managers and make them accountable to claims dollars and subsequent increases in premiums, that's music to the ears. But most of the time when we engage with people, they're not even measuring that stuff. We know they're not measuring it. They can tell you quality, they can tell you productivity, but they can't tell you anything at all about measuring safety inside their operations. And we know that that's someplace where we can immediately drive change.
Yeah, and I did a lot of that actually on the product liability side of things, on the claims end, where we would, and granted, I get jaded a lot because I think of the claims operations I work for, and we went above and beyond. And I just expected every carrier on the claims side acted the same way as we did. It's not true. But on the product liability, we would go down and we would be charting exactly individual parts. Failures and supply chains there, and then going back to the manufacturer and make recommendations.
Oh yeah, dude, and then you start getting into chain of custody and all of that stuff, and God forbid any piece or part that was manufactured in China and came over here. I mean,
don't get me
people
started
don't understand.
man.
Yeah, people don't understand custody, chain of custody and all of that. And it's funny that you mentioned product liability, because I imagine those can be very complicated claims to adjust when you're dealing with a finished product that's got 100 different component parts that 75% were subcontracted out to the people who only make that part, and they had an agent who told them, oh, you don't need to buy product liability because you're just a component to a much bigger product and they'll never find you. They're going to go for the deep pockets. Like, I'm not making that up. These are things we hear in real life, and it's the truth, man. Then next thing you know, you deal with a guy who made one little piece. I have a client that one of the things they manufacture is a small, machined metal part, but it's the fuse assembly for nuclear warheads. You know how many agents wrote that account and never even asked what the part was used for?
That's scary.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and you were just bringing up about the whole investigation piece on the claims side of things. There's a lot. So not only is it that component part, but who put it into the bigger product, and then who took that bigger product and then installed it into a larger or into a home or into a business. It gets pretty crazy and interesting, and why I tell college kids, if you ever want to be like a CSI at all, you can always start out in claims, man, and you can build from there, because you have to be the best investigator in the world to try to figure out who done it.
It's amazing to me too, man, how many people out there don't realize that. Specific to workers' comp, because we do so much of it, and that's truthfully where the majority of our claims volume comes from. But the ability now to use social media and the internet to follow people, like we had a guy in my agency that allegedly hurt both of his wrists because he fell off of a slippery truck unloading a water heater on a Friday evening. And, allegedly fell and put both of his hands down, So my client calls me, there was lag time on the reporting, by the way, always a problem. There's always an issue if there's lag time, people. So just report your claims on time. If you don't, it's a red flag to everybody involved. But this guy allegedly falls down. So the first thing I said was, go ahead and pull the GPS reports on his truck for the weekend. If this was a Friday evening claim and he can't come in Monday, I want to see what the weekend looks like. Well, we do it, and he had made like 18 round trips in a 50-minute radius because he was using our work truck to move his apartment into a new apartment on the other side of Tampa, right? So we nailed him there. If you were hurt so bad, how were you able to use what were you using our truck for? And we have it pinged at the exact address where you're moving into because you just updated your records with human resources with your new address. But this guy was a bodybuilder, so we caught him working out with weights on Instagram. And then he was posing with his wife, who was a model, and he was holding her up like this, in a picture. And then, this was a really great weekend for an injured worker. We got him at Top Golf on Sunday afternoon, just coming out of his shoes with the driver, nothing. And it's like, dude, do you really want to go down this road? And this was actually one where I pulled the employee in and it's like, look, man, let me tell you how this goes down.
Are you
I'm going to give you an opportunity to say, just kidding.
You're right.
Because if I push the envelope, this is not going to end well for you.
No,
listen, I'm not advocating that you do that as an agent, by the way. I had a very good relationship with this client and knew most of their employees on a first name basis. But seriously, if you're not doing that kind of stuff as an agent to help your clients, because this is one thing I know. Every client I've ever had who has a claim says, oh, they're just trying to screw me. It doesn't matter if it's the insurance company or the employee. They're just trying to screw you. So do your part and do a little bit of frontline investigation, because if you ever need to get special investigations involved or whatever else, hand it to them with a big red ribbon on it. In my experience, even when you put people under surveillance, it's so limited the number of times they actually follow that through to prosecution that you're just wasting a bunch of people's time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. A lot of it is just what you said. Do you have enough evidence to get somebody to withdraw the claim? Because trying to go the route of proving the fraud and all that stuff, it's usually not worth the time and effort that goes into it. But if you get them to withdraw the claim, that's everybody kind of wins, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And I don't miss those surveillance days. I'll tell you that much too.
Now, I've only had to deal with them a few times in my career, but it's never fun when you do. As much as you think it sounds intriguing, it's not. It ends up just being a huge time suck for everybody involved, and very rarely do you get enough information to really go after them and nail them. Now, I'm not going to lie. The one time you do actually get one to go through, it's a great story to tell for the rest of your career.
Oh, hell yeah.
But... Well, let me ask you this. From a claims adjuster's perspective, what's a piece of advice you'd give to the producers out there?
And so I'm going to go back again. A couple of things is, number one, develop those relationships better with your carrier partners and their claims divisions. You know what? You might not be able to get down to the adjuster level, but at least at the supervisor, manager level, heck, even VP level, so that you have somebody that you can lean on for questions or as well as help on given claims. The other thing is what David was mentioning is ask the questions, be involved, because that's going to help you on your sales end of things, of having those stories when you've had a claim and your client went through X, Y, and Z and you learned why they went through that pattern. You'll be able to help them anticipate what's to come. And that, maybe this claim won't be solved in a day or a week, or in your case, it was a couple of years with that big one, of having that information. And the only way you're going to do that is to have the conversations and be involved on the claim side as well. You can't back off completely and say, oh, they filed the claim. I hope my loss ratio doesn't go up too high. We got to be more involved.
Yep, I agree. Well, listen, man, I want to be respectful of time. We're coming up on the end of our hour that we had blocked for this. What I want you to do is tell them where the heck to find your book.
Yeah, it's real easy. So it's successfuladjustersplaybook.com. You can find it there. It's in every kind of format you can imagine, from softcover, hardcover, electronic, and then even the audio, that not only did I read it, I may have sung in it in a few chapters. So you got to check that out, Dan.
Yeah, everybody's on to me to do my own recording this time. I don't know, man. Let me ask you this. When you did it, did you do all your formatting and everything else, or did you flip it to somebody else to do that for you, or did you actually have a publisher for this?
So I had a publisher, but I did the audio recording myself. And what I did, and I sent it over to them to take care of all. But the way I did it is just through, I'm an Apple guy. I recorded it to GarageBand. I did each chapter, threw it all together, clipped off the ends, and then sent each chapter as audio files. They played with the rest of it.
Yeah, that's probably what I'll do if I end up doing it then. I mean, I've got all the software I need to record and all of that. So maybe I will. It's just making sure everything's in the right format to flip it to Amazon, because they're extremely, extremely picky about how they receive their information.
And they're damn slow too. So my Audible still isn't live, but my audio on Apple, on Nook or Barnes and Noble, whatever, it's available everywhere.
Like 30 days.
Yeah, it's crazy slow.
And they will take all 30 days. They are proud of their time that they take.
And actually, from what I've heard on, if you're familiar with the Insurance Nerds crowd and the books they've released, they haven't had luck getting them approved, where they kept setting them back and canceling them and saying, you can't do this, you got to do that. And I don't know, they might have one of their 4 or 5 books that are audio version. They weren't able to get approved for all the other versions.
See, I just hired a guy off of Fiverr that had done that and paid him $50, and he put it all together, and it was the best $50 ever.
Yeah, that's nothing, man.
Because I had no issues. Fiverr. I was able just to send it over and have it done, and it was a domestic guy too, so I wasn't even outsourcing it, overseas or anything. But it was one of those things I didn't know what I was doing, and I figured there'd be some stupid tax involved for me doing it the wrong way. And stupid tax is always more expensive than what it costs to hire a professional. So I hired the pro, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on today. People, listen, I cannot tell you enough. Go look at buying this man's book, buy it, read it, then use it, and then go back and reread it and make sure you're using everything, because there is a direct correlation to understanding and articulating the claims process and being successful as a producer. And I can't think of a better dude to educate you than Mr. Bachmann. Certainly has the experience and the reputation. So I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us, sir.
Man, that means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. And like we were talking earlier, since we're building up those relationships now with the claims people, you can always buy a copy of this book for the claims people too. You can help them out too.
I bet they would love getting a book on how to successfully adjust claims from a producer. Way to break down the barriers there, John. Anyhow, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again for coming on, man. Look forward to sharing this with our audience, and wish you nothing but the best and most success here in the future.
I appreciate you, my friend. Stay well, okay?
All right, take care.
You've been listening to the Power Producers Podcast. You can follow Killing Commercial Insurance on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check out our book, The Extra 2 Minutes, and our website, killingcommercial.com.